Welcome back to Primetime News.
And a special welcome once again to our viewers on TVJ International in the Cayman Islands and online at onespotmedia.com.
Up first this evening, under pressure from CARICOM and the international community, the United States has partially eased the oil embargo on Cuba.
The announcement, which came earlier today, opens the way for Cuba to get oil shipments from Venezuela under certain conditions.
For one local economist, Cuba's long-term energy security is still in doubt.
There's Andrea Chisholm with that story.
No oil, big problem. For weeks, Cuba has been struggling with an energy crisis which has crippled economic activity and threatened a humanitarian disaster. The United States shut off the oil which was flowing to the communist country from Venezuela by taking control of Venezuela's oil exports and threatened tariffs on Mexico or any other country that sold oil to Cuba. But on Wednesday, a lifeline. The U.S. Treasury Department said it would authorize companies to apply for licenses to resell Venezuelan oil to Cuba. The advisory said the favorable licensing policy is directed towards transactions that support the Cuban people, including the private sector. However, the advisory stated that transactions involving the Cuban military, intelligence services, or other government institutions, for example, would not be covered by the favorable licensing policy. Economist Keenan Faulkner reacted to the update.
I think the move is largely conditional, and while it will provide some relief for the Cuban people, it is clear that the U.S. is begrudgingly making this concession since it does not want to support or deal with the Cuban government in any way. And so restrictions still apply to the military, for example. And it has qualified those restrictions as not applying to the private sector and the people of Cuba.
So what does this mean for Cuba's energy security?
This is not likely to provide long-term energy security for the country since Cuba may still need some amount of concessionary terms in its oil agreements that it was used to in the past. However, this appears so far to be settled on purely commercial terms. Ultimately, I think there are larger geopolitical considerations that will need to be addressed more meaningfully in the long term so that this relief does not become merely temporary and that the Cuban people, its government and economy can begin to operate unimpeded.
The development comes days after former CARICOM heads of government labeled the move by the United States as economic warfare on the nearly 10 million people of Cuba. The slight shift in U.S. policy also coincides with the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio's visit to the CARICOM heads of government meeting now underway in St. Kitts and Nevis. Caribbean leaders have been calling for an end to the oil embargo, which affected every sector in Cuba, including transportation and food distribution. Andrea Chisholm, TVJ News.